Hey there everyone, and welcome to Bill's Retro Gaming Show. On today's video, we're going to be doing a review for Anbernic's latest handheld, the RG Cube. Is this my favorite one so far? Well, you'll find out right after this. So before we get started, first off, I want to say thank you so much for tuning into this video. If this happens to be your first time on the channel, be sure to hit that subscription button, click the notification bell if you want to be notified every time I put up a new video, give this one a thumbs up, and leave a comment below if you want to be part of the conversation. Now, Anbernic did not send this out to me for review. I know I really don't have to say that if they don't, but you've probably seen a lot of videos from people who did receive pre-release versions of this machine for review. I'm not lucky enough to be one of those, but I am a huge fan of Anbernic. This is now the third one of theirs that I've purchased. And, well, I'll tell you more about my feelings on it as the video goes on. But before we do that, let's check out their website and let's get a little bit more information on the Anbernic RG Cube. Now, this is a look at the Anbernic RG Cube on Anbernic's website. You can purchase it directly from them or through retailers like Amazon or even places like AliExpress. Now, they do sell this in a variety of versions, different colors, like this gray one. It comes in black, white, which is the version that I got, or this pinkish, purplish color. They call it radiant purple. Kind of reminds me a little bit of some of the different colors of the GameCube, which this is obviously trying to kind of hit on that nostalgia of the GameCube, calling it the RG Cube. But let's get a little more info on it. Alright, so let's just take a minute and go over the specs of what the RG Cube has. As I said before, it does come in that white, purple, gray, or black color. You're going to get a 3.95-inch IPS screen. It is multi-touch capable and has a resolution of 720 by 720. Now, the CPU and the GPU on this are a Unisoc T820 processor with a quad-core Mali 857 running at 850 megahertz for the GPU. I will say that I'm not personally, well aware of what exactly these chipsets are and what they're capable of. I do know that the RG556 from Anbernic also has the same chipset on it. So both of those machines are pretty much capable of running, the same types of games. And you've got 8 gigabytes of DDR4 memory on this, just like with the RG556. Now, what I will tell you is that it is a pretty robust chipset and GPU capable of handling games from GameCube, N64, PlayStation 2, PSP, Wii, and apparently even some Switch games, although I don't have any loaded on mine that I've checked out, but I have heard others say that they have been able to get some Switch games even running on this. Now, you are going to get 128 gig of internal storage on this, expandable with an SD card. You can purchase a model that comes with an SD card with some built-in games on it, or you can go out and buy your own SD card to put in, load your own games on it, which is what I did. It is running a version of Android 13. Again, same as the RG556. This is not a Linux-based system like some of their other handhelds, but fully Android-based. You're going to get 2.4 and 5 gig Wi-Fi, 802.11 alphabet, Bluetooth 5.0. So all of the usual suspects when it comes to wireless, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Now, along with being able to handle over 30 different emulators, the fact that this is Android-based also allows it to support Android games. And yes, there is actually a version of the Google Play Store on this, making it much easier to download different Android apps and games. And this handheld is capable of handling multiple languages. It's got 2 high-fidelity speakers on it, and it can support SD cards up to 2 terabytes. It's got a rechargeable 50 to 100 milliamp battery. They say capable of about 7 hours. Now, I will be honest and say I have not put this through any kind of tests to see how long it lasts, but I will tell you that I can leave the unit on in standby mode for hours and possibly even days and come back with little change to the battery on it and pick up and play right where I left off, which is nice. It does take almost 3 hours for this thing to fully charge from dead or practically dead. I do wish that units like this would support some kind of fast charging option, but that would probably add something to the price on it. You'll see that the Joysticks on this also have an RGB lighting effect that you can change. You've got a couple of different options on how that looks. I will show that off when we get there. And you can see some of the other functionality here is the fact that it has built-in Hall joysticks. It's got a 6-axis gyroscope sensor, Hall triggers, a high-speed fan. It supports over-the-air upgrades, online multiplayer, streaming, wireless screencasting. It does have a USB Type-C for charging and to act as a DisplayPort output. It's got a vibration motor on it, 3.5mm stereo headphones, a power saver setting, joystick light controls, display brightness, and some other functionality. Again, I will show a little bit off of that when I show you the system itself. And finally, this does come with that USB charging cable. In the box, you've got a manual. You've also got a glass screen protector if you like to put that on. You can see the different dimensions here of the box that it comes in and the system itself. I'm not going to go through all of that. You can check that out for yourself. Now, retail price for the standalone system is $170, but like I said, you can get it with various SD cards with some built-in games. If you get the 128 gig version, it's going to be about $185. For the 256 gig version, it's going to be $200. So it's up to you how you like to do this. Like I said, I prefer to just get the unit bare bones by itself, put my own SD card in because I can get an SD card a little bit cheaper than that and load my own games and not worry about the ones that they're going to give you. A lot of times with these units, what you get is you get a handful of really cool games and then a lot of knockoff and bootleg type games coming. This is coming from China. It's coming out of China. If you've gotten any of these kind of systems before, you know what to expect. So if you're, familiar with these emulators, if you're familiar with ROMs, if you've got your own set of them that you prefer to play, you could definitely go that route and put your own games on it and not worry about the ones that it comes with. But if you wanted to just get something that you could pick up and play, not worry about that, you didn't really care what games it came with specifically, just whatever it comes with, you're going to enjoy, then you could pick up the 128 or 256 gig version of this. But now that we've gotten all of that out of the way, let's get to what you really came for and show off the system itself. All right, so here we are with a look at the Anbernic RG Cube. And one thing I can certainly recommend if you're going to pick one of these up is to get one of these handy carrying cases as well. Anbernic sells these separately. These run for about $10 and in my opinion are totally worth it. One of the nice things about this is obviously, it keeps it safe, nice in there. You've got this mesh pocket here that you can throw some headphones or the charging cable in. You can see that it is molded. I'm going to get that out. It's molded so that the cube fits in there nice and snugly. And, it's just good to help keep it safe, to have this to throw in a bag or just to take with you, when you go places. I totally recommend it. And here we go. This is the RG Cube itself. You can see I purchased the white unit. I almost considered the black, but decided to go with the white. Anyway, I do like the look of it. You can see the screen in the middle here. I'll get into more of that a little bit later. You've got your two Hall effect joysticks here with that RG lighting around it. You've got this D-pad here, which is nice and clicky. You're actually hearing the sound from the OS itself as I move around. Let me just turn that off a little bit. You can see it a little bit, hear it a little bit better like that. It does work nicely. You've got your A, B, X, and Y buttons here. You've got your trigger, your shoulder and trigger buttons here. All right, so down along the bottom of the unit, you've got a start and a select button here. You've got a home button and the Anbernic button, which is used to get in and out of the built-in launcher. On the bottom here, you've got your dual firing speakers, which sound pretty good. I'm not sure how thrilled I am that they're on the bottom like this, but it works okay for the way that this is built. Again, along the top here, I showed off the shoulder and the trigger buttons before, but I also wanted to point out you've got your 35mm headphone jack. You've got your USB-C right here. There's only one USB-C port. This is multifunction. You can use it for charging. You can hook up a USB-C to display port on here to plug it into a TV. You can use it for OTG. it kind of does everything. It's kind of an all-in-one. And then here is the slot for the SD card. Now along the back here, you can see this is the housing for the fan. There's this is, I believe, the intake, and then up here is the exhaust for it. You can see how this is molded like this, which is really nice. I have to say that when you're playing it like this, this really gives it a good grip. So you feel like you can hold on to it without dropping it. It is not slippery at all. It's just, like I said, it's got a nice grip to it. And then lastly, along the sides here, you've got your power button and your volume control. Now this is running Android 13 on it, which is a pretty, recent version of Android, which is nice. For that, you can see that the screen here is multi-touch, so you can kind of swipe back and forth to get to your different apps and games and things like that. It comes fully loaded with a whole bunch of different emulators on it, and of course you can add your own. You can add your own apps. You can see I added Hokai there. I added another launcher to there. Maybe I'll show that off a little bit. You can see you've got access to RetroArch on here as well. The nice thing about this being Android is that you can get into settings and things very easily. There is a button there for settings, or you can swipe down to get to things. You can see here, you can control the brightness of the screen very easily on this, which is very nice. And of course, you have access to things like your Wi-Fi settings, Bluetooth, so on and so forth. Of course, as I mentioned, again, being that this is Android-based, you also have access to the Google Play Store, which again makes it really easy to add apps and games to this if you want. Now, I also own the Arc D from Anbernic, which was a dual launch system. It had Linux and Android on it. And one of the things that I don't like is the fact that that version of Android is a custom version. It does not have the Google Play Store, so you have to side load a lot of apps on it. There isn't a very easy way to add your own apps to it. Now, one thing I want to talk about is the screen on this. This is a 1:1 aspect ratio, so it's basically a square. And that works fine for a lot of retro games. I think a lot of the retro games look and play really well on this. Some games that are designed more for widescreen, whether it's PSP or some Android games, can look a little bit distorted on this if you push them to full screen, or if you have the bars along it, which just makes it a little bit small looking when you're playing. But overall, I do like the screen on this. So one thing I want to touch on with the screen is that I saw with a lot of videos with the pre-production models that went out that people were complaining about light bleed on them. Now, Anbernic did say that that was supposed to be taken care of by the time the retail versions went out, but even some of the people who got the retail versions were complaining about it. Now, I've got all my lights off in the room here. I'm just looking at a black screenshot, and I will tell you that I can see just a little bit. There's a little bit of light bleed right at the top there, and that's about it. I'm not really noticing any light bleed. It's really tough to tell, I know, in the video, but there really isn't much of anything. And I have the brightness turned all the way up on this. And I have to tell you, in regular use, playing games, things like that, I didn't notice it at all. So it's definitely not something that hinders the use of the machine. Now, before I turn my lights back on and keep going, I just want to show off one other thing, and that is the ambient light feature. That is what lights up the two joysticks down here. If I swipe down from here and go over, you can see right here, ambient light, and you've got a bunch of different options. Right now, I've got it off. I'm going to turn it back on, and there you go. There's your RGB lighting around the joysticks. You've got a couple of different options. You can just have it be a plain white light. You can have it breathe, where it will kind of change colors back and forth. You can go for a rainbow effect like this. This is called Marquee. I'm not sure why, but it's probably the one that I like the most. And then you've got chasing, which I'm not quite sure exactly what that does. I think that reacts as you play the games. And same with gaming. I think it kind of reacts as you play in different things. But I'm going to turn it back to Marquee because that's the one I like. I'm going to turn my lights back on, and then we'll continue looking at this. So let's take a minute and talk about the games and what this is capable of. Now, as I said, you can see here that it is fully loaded with a bunch of Android-based emulators on it, all different kinds. And then, of course, you've got the ever popular RetroArch. So as you're playing, as you're deciding what you want to play, you can decide which emulator you want to use, whether it's a dedicated one or if you just use RetroArch. Now, pressing this button right here will get you into the built-in launcher, and you can see they've got a bunch of systems set up here. So I'll just go through them. You can play games from the NES, the Sega Master System, PC Engine, Capcom Play System 1, Mega Drive, Game Boy, Neo Geo, Super Nintendo, Capcom Play System 2, PlayStation, Sega Saturn, Nintendo 64, Play System 3, MAME, which is basically arcade games, Game Boy Color, Dreamcast, Neo Geo Pocket, Naomi, WonderSwan Color, PS2, Final Burn, arcade vertical games. So they've got that kind of in its own subsection if you wanted to do that. Game Boy Advance, Atomis Wave, PSP, Nintendo DS, Nintendo Wii. This is where you would put Wii and GameCube games because it basically uses the Dolphin emulator, which does both, and 3DS and Pico 8. Now, one thing I want to do real quick is show this off. If you don't get the one of the SD cards with built-in games, if you decide to go your own route, you have a few different options for how you want to put them on here. When you put the SD card in, it's going to format it. It's going to set it up with a bunch of different folders for all the Android-based stuff. And then you can do what you want. You can either just create a bunch of subfolders for each of the systems, or what I did is I created a ROMs folder and then subfolders in there just to keep things a little bit neater. But then it became a little tricky to figure out how to get the games to show up in here. So by pressing the A button, I will get into the games list, and then I'm going to hit the select here, and that's going to get me to my emulator settings. Now here, I can choose which emulator I want it to run, whether I want it to use RetroArch or different emulators within RetroArch or the NES EMU, which is an Android-based version. And if I go over to ROM settings, here is where I can tell it what folders to look in for the different games. And I actually have mine in a NES subfolder within a ROMs subfolder on the SD card. If I had just created an NES folder on the SD card without putting it into a ROMs subfolder, this would have seen them right away because this was the one that it came set up with. But you can add up to 3 different paths for looking for your games, and then you're going to say start searching for games, and it will just add them to your list. Now, I believe there is a way to do some screen scraping to have these show up here, or you can add your own box art. I have not done that yet, but you can see that, all of my Nintendo games are listed here. So I don't want to spend a lot of time going over all of the different games and emulators that this is capable of. For many of you, I'm sure you've seen reviews of similar units before. Something like this is obviously very capable of handling games from older generations, whether it's Atari, Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Master System or Genesis, Game Boy Advance, things like that. But there are some newer systems that I just want to take a minute and show off. And one of the things I really love about this is the ability for it to handle Nintendo DS and 3DS games. All right, so real quick, here is a look at Mario Kart DS running on here. And you can see it plays really well. You've got the touch screen at the bottom, which acts just like the touch screen, for the DS, which is really nice. And here we are playing a little bit of Mario Kart, and yeah, it plays nice and smooth for a DS game. You've got the dual screens, and it works really, really well. All right, and here we are with a little GameCube going on. This is Mario Sunshine, and I gotta say that it looks really good, plays nice and smooth on this, looks fantastic on the screen here. But yeah, that's just a real quick look at Mario Sunshine for GameCube. Now, one thing I was disappointed with the ARC-D was the fact that it really couldn't handle Sega Saturn games very well, but this one does definitely handle them pretty well. I'm having a hard time playing while recording this, Little Nights into Dreams here, but you can see that it does play very smoothly. You can also see, you know, again, because of the aspect ratio, that it only takes up a portion of the screen. You can change that in the settings so that it's, you know, a little stretched out full screen if you like, or you can leave it in its proper aspect ratio and play it, but you're going to lose some of the screen down here. But regardless, it does actually play Sega Saturn games really, really well. Here's another one. This is a Nintendo 64, playing a little Cruisin' USA here. I got to figure out the controls a little better on games like this. For instance, in order for me to accelerate, I'm actually pressing in on the joystick here to act as the accelerator button, which is not ideal. But one thing I will say is that it does handle it really well, and it does play very smoothly. So I am very happy with the ability to play N64 games on this. Again, my ARC-D is also capable of handling a lot of N64 games, but without these kind of joysticks on it, you're sometimes limited to what the games you can play on it, because that just has a D-pad on it. And finally, here is a little bit of God of War for PS2. And again, you can see how gorgeous it looks, how smoothly it plays. And again, the aspect ratio on this is not quite as bad as it was with the Saturn. Yes, you've got the bars above and below, but it kind of puts it more in the middle of the screen. I don't know why the Saturn one put it close to the top like it did. But yeah, I got to say that this just plays really, really well. So PS2 games are just a dream on this system. And the last thing I just want to show off real quick is, again, with the ability to download from the Google Play Store, you do have access to other launchers like Launchbox, or this is one called Daishijo, which has, again, a bunch of different emulators built into it: Commodore Amiga, Atari 2600, 5200, 7800. So you've ColecoVision. You've got access to a bunch of different systems that the built-in launcher doesn't have. And, you know, this launcher tends to have a few more features, be a little bit more robust. So I do like to have this launcher as well. This is, again, Daishijo, something that you could definitely look up on the Play Store. Hopefully I can get that to kind of focus a little bit. Daishijo, I guess it's called. But that's one that if you were to get something like this, I would highly recommend downloading that as an alternate launcher as well, if you like. Now, real quick, something else I wanted to do is just show off some of the other handhelds that I have from Anbernic, so you can kind of see a little bit of the difference between them. This is the first one that I bought. This is the RG35XX. I've done a review on this. You can see it's got that kind of a Game Boy look to it. It is a smaller, so it's the smallest screen of the three that I own. It's the smallest handheld of the three that I own. And I do still like to have this for a quick throw in your bag, on-the-go player, again, for games like Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, or Nintendo, you know, some of the older games. This one plays like a champ. The second one I bought was this. This is the RG ARC-D. Again, this is a dual boot system. It's got both Linux and Android on it. I tend to play more on the Linux side with this and just kind of keep it simple, but it does have a touchscreen for the Android-based size. It is slightly larger than the RG Cube. The screen is also slightly larger with more of a 4:3 aspect ratio to it. So it's got that going for it. But finally, now we have the RG Cube, which is kind of an in-between size-wise. It's slightly smaller than this. It's got a similar size screen, except with this being the 1:1 aspect ratio and this being the 4:3 aspect ratio on it. But so far, overall, I do have to say that this is my favorite of the three. I like the compact design on it. I like the grip on it. I like the fact that it's got the joysticks on it, which this one does not have. And it is definitely a more robust player, capable of playing a lot more games than this one. So if I want to take my PlayStation 2 games, or GameCube, or Nintendo 64, because of the joysticks, on the go, this is definitely the one that I'm going to pick up and play the most. Now, just a couple of last little details that I do want to mention on this. First off, with the USB-C port and with the fact that this is Android-based, one of the things that I really like about this is that I can literally just plug this into my computer and it will see it just like it will see the file system just like it's a plug-in hard drive. So I can copy games and files back and forth to this very easily. I have access to both the internal 128 gig and my external SD card as well. So it makes putting games on this a lot easier than having to pop the SD card out, put it in a reader, add my games, and then pop it back in. I can just leave that sucker in there, plug this in, and I'm good to go. Now, one thing that I have not gotten into yet really with this that I still want to check out is its wireless capabilities, being able to cast this to, say, my TV and play games on my TV using this as just a gamepad, or through the USB-C port. Apparently, you can even cast games from your PC to this and play them that way. Again, something that I haven't really gotten into yet, but I definitely want to check out. All I will say is that having the ability to do that in a handheld like this definitely adds value to the system. And there you have it. That is the RG Cube by Anbernic. And so there you have it. That is a look at the RG Cube from Anbernic. And I do have to say that this is right now my favorite of the handhelds that I've purchased from them. You saw the other two that I own, the RG35XX and the ARC-D. And so far, I just really like this one. It feels good in the hands. It plays nice. It can definitely handle a lot more games than the other two that I have on it. Although, again, I like the RG35XX for its smaller form factor to be able to pick up and play like Game Boy type games. That's a fun one to just throw in a bag and take with me. The ARC-D definitely has its place as well, especially with the slightly wider screen on it. While this one does have kind of a weird screen aspect to it, it works, and it works well for this handheld, so I do really like it. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of the RG Cube? Do you own one yourself, and are you enjoying it? Were you thinking about picking one up, and maybe this helped make a decision for you? Let me know that too in the comments below. But that's going to do it for this one. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead and give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment below, of course subscribe to the channel, and that's all for now. I will see you guys on the next one. Happy gaming, and have a great day.